Hi there, this is Dr. Embody with Project 4. So what are we doing with Project 4? Well, what we've done is we've pulled off a file of Apple stock data, and we've put it into a file called table.csv. CSV stands for comma separated values, So that means every line in there is separated by commas. And what you're going to do is you're going to grab a column out of that, write a program, we'll grab some columns and do some simple arithmetic on it. So we're just trying, what are we doing with stocks here? And we ask you to do this with particular functions. So we're going to be practicing with functions, and we're also going to be practicing with lists. And let's take a look at that. How might we start? Well, anytime I have remember, any problem, there's always a small one trying to get out. So the first thing I try to do for reading a file is let's just open it up and see what what's going on with it. So let's do something simple. We have to, the project says, oh, you're going to prompt for the file name and stuff like that. But while I'm testing, now when we have a file, this file has to be in the same directory that that your programming project file is. So both files have to be there together. And so we open the file. And for every line in the file, so the FP, that's our object in memory for the file, I'm going to just print the line. Okay. Now, there's lots of lines in here, so I don't want to print them all. So what I will do is just have a little counter just to make sure that I'm not going to print a gazillion lines. So if my count is bigger than, I don't know, let's look at 10 lines, then we'll break. And so all this does is it reads the file and it's going to print out 10 lines. Now, what are some of the things we notice about this? One is that there is a header line. Maybe I'm not really interested in that. And each line has a bunch of things separated by commas. That's why we call this a comma separated file. In fact, there's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items separated by commas. But right now, it's all one big string. So there's a couple of things that I can play around with this. One thing is we can skip that line with this nice little thing called read line. So I can take my file pointer, read line, and that will just let me skip that first line. So now when we do it, I get my bunch of lines of code, but notice the difference here is that originally there was a header line, and now it isn't. So we got rid of that. And I can even, if I want to, ignore header line. Okay, so these are coming out as a single string. So one of the things that we always want to do is make a list. Line list. Take my line and split it. Everything is separated by commas. So we'll split it with commas, and this time instead of printing the line, we'll print the line list. Now, what does this look like? Right. Now, this looks a little bit better. We now have a list of items, but we've got a little pesky end of line character there. So let's take care of that guy. We can take care of that. And that's before we split it, we can strip off white space, which includes stripping off that character. Right. So, now that looks a lot better. Suppose I wanted to do something like, let's just look at the last one. And I have a list, and that's item 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what I'm going to do is let's just print our just the last item, the 6th item in there. Okay, so now instead of printing the whole line, I just printed the whole list. Suppose I wanted to just collect all those guys. Well, to collect things in a list, we start with an empty list. And this time, instead of printing those items, let's append them onto my list. Oops. No, cancel. That's what we want to do. I just hit the wrong button there. All right. And so at the end here, what I will do is I will just print this L that I created. Right? So the important thing here is the pattern. Right? I start with an empty list, and now I append on it. So all of these guys, that is the 6 items, they will all be put into a list. Right? And then I will print that list. And again, we're only grabbing 10 items out of this file just while we're experimenting with it. Right? So now, notice this. Right? Before I had each of these items, 474.98, there's a 474.98, 468.22, 468.22, and so on. Notice that these are still strings, right? I haven't made them into numbers yet, so they're still strings. Of course, when I printed them individually, they just printed as strings without the quotes. But when I show the whole list, the quotes are still there. So what have I done? I have now taken that column and I have made a list of those items. And so that pattern is really critical here in terms of what we're doing. We start with my list being empty, and then we keep appending onto it. So that's the essence in terms of what we're doing with lists. Now, how about with functions? Well, if we go back and look at our description now, we see the first thing that we're supposed to do is have a function that gets the input descriptor. We're supposed to be prompting, and then we're going to open the file and return the file descriptor. I'm not going to do all that, but let's make a start out of it. And notice that we actually gave you a name, and it doesn't take any parameters, and it does return the file descriptor. See the word return in there. So those are all important clues for us. Let's incorporate that. So we can go over here to my my program, and now what I need to do is create a function. So we have def, and it says it's supposed to be named get input descriptor, and it takes no parameters. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my line in there that open the file, and then I'm going to return it. Now, of course, you're going to have to do a lot more than that, but there's the simplest function just to see if it can work. And so we're going to return that file pointer. We can give it a different name if we want, and then we call the function. Since I changed the name, I have to change it down here. So the only thing I did different is I just moved this one line into the inside of a function. Okay, and then I call that function here. I gave it a different name, and then I used that name down here. So a very small step. Does this program still do the same thing? Notice how we're doing this in small steps. Okay, up file FP. I forgot to redefine that. Remember, so I can look at my error message. It says FP was not defined, and of course it wasn't defined because I gave it a different name. Now we can run that, and there it is. We get our list again. So there's going to be a lot more to be put in there. And now what is let's take a look at the next function here. All right, that says get a list. It takes the file object. That's the same thing we get out of A, and a column number. That's kind of like our column, 0 through 6, and it tells us, it returns a list that consists of tuples. Well, I'm not going to worry about the tuples yet, but let's look at returning a just a particular value, right? And that's what we were doing in my in the program at this point. So let's create this function. So again, def, and it gives us a name, get data list, and it's got a file object and a column number. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all this stuff, take all this stuff, put it inside my function. And let's see, so we don't need that. So, but we're going to still, I made a mistake by copying that in there. Nope, that's not what we want. So what was the line that I just did? File pointer equals get input descriptor. All right, so that and I think I'm even going to leave that out. Okay, so let's see. So we don't call it file pointer, we call it file object in here, and we call it file object in here. All right, so we're going to do the column line, and at this point this thing will still print, and let's fire this up. Now the first thing you notice is that nothing happened because I've put everything inside of functions. So let's try this out. We can test our functions in the shell. All right, so now I have a file pointer. I could just go through it again, but to do the get data list, let's try that out. Get, let's see, so we'll have my, we'll call it the data list equals get data list, and we send it the file object, that's my FP, and some column number. We were playing around with column 6. And let's see what happens. So it printed some values because in my code I still printed the line. Well, that's fine because we're just testing, but what we really want to do, not printing the line, printing the list, is we want to return that list that I created. Let's try this again. We'll fire up my project. We do get the descriptor, and now nothing happens. So let's take a look at my data list, and there's my data list. Now there's a couple of things that still need to be fixed up. This whole, we actually are supposed to be doing this for column numbers, and I have a 6 in there, so we should fix that because we want to be doing the column number. And now we can do the same thing again. We call the open, get the input descriptor, and now we pass it a 6, and there's my program. I mean, there's the result. That's a list of the last things. Now notice there's still strings, and we have to play around with that. But notice a couple of things. Now everything is functions. So when I run this program, nothing happened until I started calling the functions themselves. And what did I do? So I called the first one, and I got a file pointer, which I have to call FP. I took that and I passed it into the next function, get data list. It takes a file pointer and some column number. That goes through and it collects everything together. It only does 10 of them. And then now I have a data list that gets returned. So this L that got returned gets named data list, and so when I look at data list, I get those 10 values. Of course, when I'm, at some point, I'm going to want to get rid of this part of my code that does the counting, so that I can in fact get comment that out. When I run this code this time, we open a file, we get everything in there, and now when I look at the data list, I get a lot of data. Whoa! We get lots and lots of data. Like, a lot of lines of data, so many that we don't even want to think about looking at these. In fact, how big is this thing? Wow, it's big. What's the length of data list? Oh, it's got 7,000 items in it. Yeah, that's kind of big. Just for kicks and giggles, let's look at the first 10 on there. And then we see that those are the same 10 that we had before. That's why I was working with only 10 of them, right? Because you can see how hard it is even to look at this whole thing. So there's still a lot of other stuff to be done here. And at some point, I'm going to want to take these lines and put them in, I'm going to want to create a main and then put these calls into the main. So I will take this, I will create a main, and I will put that line of code in there. Of course, I got to get rid of those, and then the there's another line of code. Now, of course, that doesn't do exactly what I want, but it does a lot of it, because I'm going to have to, where does that number, where does this 6 come from, for example? Well, it says that we're probably supposed to prompt for that. So there's a lot to be done here. That remains. We haven't even taken a look at the get the average data. So that this list that I create, I pass it to another function which does some arithmetic. And notice that even this get data list, it actually is supposed to return a tuple, so we get both the date and the column data. I just showed you to do the column data. Hey, I got to leave something for you to do. So there's still a lot left to be done. But I've got to start on it, and you can see how these functions break the problem down into smaller pieces. So hopefully that'll give you a start on it.